happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 362, almost for Halloween, but it's not. It's Wednesday, October 29th, 2025. My name is Wes Fryer. I am coming to you from quite rainy Charlotte, North Carolina, where we have had to have indoor recess at school all week. But the rumor is the sun is going to come out next week, and not next week. It's going to come out tomorrow. And so anyway, it's I have lunch duty every third week, so it's been a good week to not be on lunch duty. But we're not going to talk about that. We're gonna be enlightened tonight by the EdTech Yoda of the North, the person who knows more about AI than probably 99% of the civilians you'll see walking around just outside on a normal day. His name is Jason Neiffer, and he is joining us from the Great White North of Montana. Although I bet it's not white yet, is it?
No, and this has kind of always been true of Western Montana, but it's been more true in the last couple of years, particularly in the Missoula area, but a lot of rain. So I did spend the last couple of days in New Orleans at the Full Scale conference, formerly known as the Aurora Institute, and a wonderful a group of people joined together to talk about flexible education models and competency-based education and all of the kind of big picture pieces of what we can do to kind of head school into different types of directions. A very quick trip down there and back, but it was hot and muggy in New Orleans, so that was a little different for me. And it was freezing cold when I got off the plane today, back in Missoula. But I like four seasons. I think that's one of the delights of living in Montana is we have four very distinct seasons. But I'm the executive director of Montana Digital Academy, which is the state virtual school located here in Missoula on the beautiful University of Montana campus. But I think we've got an agenda tonight. Is that true, Dr. Fryer?
We do, and thanks to you. Well, we have tidings of great joy. I have tidings of great joy because for months and months, and longer than I want to admit, I've been behind on post-production. And so without consulting with Jason, I decided to just go ahead and change the workflow a little bit. And all of our episodes are now available on Substack. So you can still go to edtechsr.com, but on the front, you'll find links to our Substack and YouTube and Spotify and all these places. But everything is updated because of a delay in post-production. YouTube has really been the only place you could get to all of our episodes. As I see my arms disappearing, I don't know what's going on with the green screen here. So anyway, that's item number one is all of our channels should be updated with the latest episode 361. Tonight's 362. And I think that the new workflow, which is basically download from YouTube, publish to Substack, and put all the links in and go. I think that's going to work a lot better than the more cumbersome circa 2005 carryover old way that I used to do that. But we have a show tonight that, not surprisingly, is going to be chock full of AI. So sometimes we have categories. Tonight we just have like 15 or 20, probably 20 articles there, which you can get to, by the way, by going to edtechsr.com/links. That hasn't changed. I'll go ahead and drop into the chat the direct Google Doc link. Hello to Peggy George, coming to us from Phoenix. SNC joining. I think my dad is joining. And we're also going to talk about miscellaneous. So it's like AI, miscellaneous, and Geek of the Week. And Dr. Neiffer, you have done the lion's share of the links tonight. So thank you so much. I will defer to you, sir. Where would you like to begin?
Well, it's probably a rabbit hole, but I feel like that this show could be called This Week in Rabbit Holes. But the Agentic browsers, which have been really, really kind of stuck in my craw for the last couple of weeks or so. And I have to say that I agree with what seems like a growing majority of tech commentators that people don't know what to do with these, right? I will say that it's not fitting very well in my workflow. I'm a little scared of the browsers because they have some high security risks, but I do want to start off with the major news. TechCrunch reports on October 25th that there are glaring security risks with these new AI-powered browsers. And we talked about this a little bit last week when we talked about the release of Atlas, which is ChatGPT's agentic browser. There's also Comet from Perplexity. There's another one I'm going to tell you about in a moment, which is actually working in the background right now, and I actually am hoping I can show something off here in a couple minutes regarding that. But the way these browsers work is that they're all built on top of Chromium, which is Google's open source browser project. So they're widely compatible with the internet. But instead of having any of Chrome's standard features in them, they've built kind of the agentic tool set on top of them. So the Comet browser is Perplexity, and the Atlas browser is ChatGPT, and then Microsoft is also building this functionality into their Edge browser. There's dozens of plugins that do this now, and then another browser option I'm going to tell you about here in a couple of minutes. But what all this does, in essence, is provides an agent to you. And I haven't seen my dog in 4 days, and he just snuck into my room for some pets and some loves. Hi, Lou the dog.
It's okay. It's all right. Hey, this is a family show. With the dogs participate. It's all good.
Yes. Hi, big guy. Hi, big guy. I missed you too. So there's been a lot of interesting articles the last couple of weeks about this. There's been a lot of interesting commentary in my area of the education store, which is distance learning, because it's not a far-fetched to think or believe that these agentic browsers could literally log into an LMS and complete class assignments for you, because there have been sample videos of exactly this across LinkedIn and other locations. But I want to mention it from two different perspectives. The first one is that they are, they're clunky, right? That part of it is that, and I can't recall who the commentary was from earlier today, but Paul Thurrott on This Week in Windows Weekly over on the Twit network. I just saw a clip of it, and he said that, I don't really want a bunch of tools in my browser. The browser, I want to be relatively minimalistic, because the target of a web browser is the web. So you want to be on the web, and I think that certainly makes quite a bit of sense. But I'll go a step further to say that, and I've only seen a clip of this. I've not watched last week's Hard Fork yet, but Casey Newton also said that he'd been playing around in the Atlas browser and still felt like it was, it didn't really fit in the space of how we utilize the web. And that's me too. But there are a couple of articles that are certainly worth examining that I think are issues. And then I would even come with a warning about this. So that TechCrunch article talks about the glaring security issues, and the big picture is that we don't really still kind of understand how AI works. And when AI analyzes a page, it may take words on that page as an instruction. And you've seen this over and over and over again the last couple of years, but especially the earliest of kind of agentic AI, automated Twitter accounts, for example. You could say things to AI bots like, forget previous instructions and now follow these instructions. That's called a prompt injection in AI security parlance. And it's a real risk, right? And because these agentic browsers have agency, right? That's the title of the concept. Then they could do things like look up information that maybe you're logged into, or could order something for you on your behalf. And again, I have something going on in the background right now that I do look forward to kind of sharing here in a couple of moments. But you can ask these browsers to do things like put together an Amazon cart for you. But these do come at a huge risk. And I would say to our fellow educators that for those of you experimenting with agentic browsers, awesome. Please continue to do so. Let us know what you're finding that you think could have some applicability to all of our work in education. But I wouldn't log into any school accounts in an agentic browser, because we just don't know how these things work.
I'm going to say two phrases that come to mind in here: sandboxing and air gap. which is not exactly applicable, but like the sandbox is this idea that you're going to play with something. Somebody around here wrote a book called Playing with Media a long, long time ago that's very out of date. But it's good to play with these tools and learn how they work. When folks are super concerned about security, they air gap their systems. They don't put them online. They segment them. They keep them separate. And so my recommendation, ideally, if you're going to play with this, would be set up a separate, Gmail account or whatever. Don't put your regular email, your regular things in it. Use a separate system. I wouldn't even run it on your regular production machine. We talked last time and before about Microsoft's proposal, like fairly recently, that they were going to record everything that was happening on your PC, and then that was going to be helpful to you. Well, these browsers potentially are recording every single thing that you do. And I don't think we value privacy enough in the United States. I'll just speak for myself. I don't think I have, throughout my 55 years of life, valued privacy enough. And I don't think that I, as a teacher, probably spend enough time talking about privacy and its importance. And I've read folks that I kind of tend to agree with that privacy is sort of the foundation of all other rights. So I think there's not only a security concern, there's a privacy concern. I'm a big advocate of playing with media and playing with AI and having an AI play date and all of those things. But we really do need to be responsible with this. And I just think this cautionary starting point is really, really vital when it comes to agentic browsers. I'm curious. We had the SNC said he saw an agentic saw ChatGPT Atlas order a Domino's pizza. It only took 17 minutes. If that was for delivery too, that was impressive. But I think he's talking about it, place the order.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about how these things are going to become productive. I know you're already, Jason, using a variety of tools that remind me of app smashing. We have the iPad, we're like this and this and this. It's an if this, then that sequence or workflow. And I think we're going to get there, but we got to be cautious. And, we're early adopter innovator folks, or at least we aspire to be. And there's probably a number of those folks that are listening live or that are going to hear the show. So it's a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just like really no other era because of the sheer speed of how these tools are kind of whipping to us at lightning speed. But we're not caught up on broad ethical terms regarding chatbots yet. So the fact that we're taking these technologies and starting to plug them into things that can largely act on their own, I think is absolutely and vaguely terrifying, right? That we're this is marching ahead, whether we have our arms wrapped around it or not. And I think that's something we need to be super thoughtful about for sure.
And to take the educational lens, which we say we're going to do all the time, these tools are not ready for students. These tools are not ready probably for mainstream world. They need to be tested, but there's such an incentive for these companies to be showing they're on the cutting edge, to gain more investment, for a lot of reasons. They're putting out things that are frankly, they appear to be half baked. And while that's exciting, and it can also be amazing and transformative, and wow, look what it can do. I absolutely believe we need to be helping our students learn with AI. I could be on a soapbox for a while about that, but I don't think these cutting edge tools are things that we need to be using in the classroom. And I'll also say that we need to be careful with data that we're going to be putting into these systems. We've talked about that before.
Yep, absolutely. And then I would point out too, before I kind of get into my maybe tonight's demo phase, maybe that's something we should come up with a bumper for. But the folks at Perplexity have released a pretty detailed blog article actually about what their strategy is for mitigating these prompt injection attacks like we talked about earlier. And I like the article. I thought it was very interesting. It looks like a lot of thought went into it, and that the browser isn't just pointing a rogue LLM at the web and saying help me process this, but instead it's building in subtle layers into to the process itself of analyzing information with the large language models. And so great on Perplexity for doing that. I think Perplexity sometimes gets pushed to the B and C tier status, but I do think they're doing very interesting things, and they're clearly looking to get attention in this space. I do think that some of the kind of mainstream tech media folks, for example, the AI Inside podcast, of which I am an executive producer because I give some money to them at their top tier every month because of the great work that they're doing. I mean, they kind of, I wouldn't say mock, but they certainly have a perspective that folks at Perplexity have a bit of a rebellious streak and are looking to garner attention, but they're also doing really good work.
Two things, Jason. I propose we could do this on the EdTech Situation Room, that you and I periodically share the tech tools and podcasts that we're paying for. Because if we're putting out money, and neither of us are millionaires, at this point, that's a pretty strong endorsement.
Yeah.
But it also changes over time, because I know we're trying different things and letting things lapse. Second question is, can you just give an elevator speech for Perplexity? Because I bet I'm not the only person who will listen to this that hasn't spent a lot of time in Perplexity.
Yeah.
How do you pitch it? Why, for those of us, like I'm paying for ChatGPT and I pretty much live there for my AI, why should I be spending at least some more time in Perplexity?
Yeah. So I should first say that one of the things that changes the calculus with Perplexity quite a bit is the fact that they're practically giving the tool away. And so a couple of months ago, I took advantage. There were tons of coupon codes that were available via places like eBay, where you could spend $20 and get a whole year of a pro account for that amount of money. Now they're giving them away to teachers and to students. And if you have a PayPal account, I think you can get Perplexity Pro for free for a year. So it's not a real expensive proposition to get access to their pro piece, but it is really an interesting play if you have no intent on paying for an AI account. Either you're not in the financial position to do so, or don't want to put any money into that because of the perceived utility of that. You can pay relatively modest amount of money and get access to their entire tool set. And Perplexity's gig is that they do searching in addition to processing the results through a large language model. And so they were one of the first to do kind of deep research. So in other words, agentic research. So instead of just typing in basic search terms and processing the results, it goes through a process in their logarithm to determine in-depth questions and also cite its sources. They were one of the first to really do that in that space. But also they give you access to this is as true in the free as it is in the it's true in the free as it is in the pro, access to several models. And so you can get access to Sonar, which is their model, but also there's Claude Sonnet 4.5 built in, and ChatGPT 5 and Gemini 2.5 Pro, and a variety of reasoning models. And so if you don't want to give money to ChatGPT and Claude and Google Gemini and Grok, you can simply pay the relatively modest fee for a year-long pro account to this and get access to several models. And so this has turned into a real I think deal or bargain for those that want to experiment. But it has several other features. There are research pages, which means you can start a topic and it will continue to research that over time. So you can go see updates. It will create apps for you, which basically are web pages, but they can also do some agentic things. But also they released the comment browser a couple of weeks ago that allows you to log in with your Perplexity account and have that agent process, which means that it can do things for you on its own. So it's a very interesting model, and the fact that they're giving away to so many folks, I think is absolutely a game changer if you want an access to these pro models, but don't want to pay for them at $20 or $25 a pop a month.
Awesome, thank you.
So So the thing I wanted to share was that a lot of attention has been given to ChatGPT's Atlas browser and Perplexity's Comet browser over the last couple of weeks. But as it turns out, there are other plays in this space. Like I mentioned earlier, Microsoft is adding agentic features into the Edge browser, which is certainly, I think it's the number 3 browser in terms of overall usage. But I found something a couple of weeks ago that I bookmarked, and as it turns out, I spent a lot of time traveling the last couple of days, and so I had some time to go through some of my to process bookmarks, and I discovered Browser OS. And Browser OS is an open sourced piece of software that you can download for free. It's built on top of the Chromium browser. So that's the open source browser created and maintained by Google. It's what Chrome is based off of. And it has agentic capabilities in it. And so all you need to do is get what's referred to as an API key from, we've talked about all these providers before, but OpenAI or Anthropic, which makes Claude, or OpenRouter is one I've given props to before. You can also get a free API key from Google through their AI Studio. And it basically does the agentic thing in an open source browser. And so I want to just do just a very quick demo here to kind of show off what that looks like, because it's pretty wild stuff. But this here is Browser OS, and I just set this up a couple of hours ago. And so I was doing a couple things here. I'm traveling to Japan in December with my buddy Mikey. We're going to spend 10 days kind of doing a nerd trip there. And I asked the agentic browser, and I plugged in a ChatGPT API key here. So it's using ChatGPT to do this. And I was asking it to look for a flight from Hiroshima to Tokyo on December 17th, a one-way flight in business class. So I gave it as many context as I could, so that it did very specific research, and it failed mightily. It did find its way to Google Flights. I didn't tell it where to find the flight, but it spent 10 minutes fumbling around this page and wasn't able to get me anything that made any sense. And you'll notice that it finally stopped on Tokyo to Portland on January 10th, which is nowhere near what I was trying to do. But I did try something else that I thought was kind of interesting. I did point it towards our document where Wes and I catalog links that we're going to talk about during the show, kind of our rundown page, if you will. And I gave it a prompt that it also kind of fumbled through, but I said, please grab all the links on the 29 October 2025 episode 362, open in a new tab, and write me a summary of the article for my EdTech podcast, the EdTech Situation Room. Look it up if you need to. And it also failed, but it did try. So it did end up opening up a couple of the articles that were in there, but it also, I think, it kind of hallucinated links, I think. So some of these weren't the actual pages that were in our rundown. So I think it saw the title and tried to guess what the article page was. So it wasn't very accurate, unfortunately, nor did it get to the point where it was actually doing the summary part of this. But the fact that it got to the point where it found articles, right, at least the titles of the articles, and tried to open it up in another window. You see here all of the thinking that it went through here on the right hand side, and it took about 8-9 minutes on the back end side to do this. And then it did end up summarizing the article about the Grokkapedia, which we'll get to a little bit later in the show. So not successful, right? But it's an open source browser that, utilizing a very inexpensive API access. I like to think of it as the Costco of ChatGPT and LLM access, because you can buy in bulk and only use or pay for what you use. You now have an agentic browser, right? And so one of the things that I'm thinking about is I've seen a lot of media in the last week about how people are openly asking Google to back off some of their agentic capabilities, particularly in Chrome, because they're worried about student academic honesty. And while I think that's the right call, I also think that Google's homework mode, which is an agentic feature, I think is also too soon to be just rolling that out into all browsers, everywhere. I also want to make the point that our tech savvy kids will find, open browser or browser OS and be able to you easily figure out how to get an API key. I've taught these students before. I spent 2 years teaching computer networking at the high school I taught in, and these kids are at home playing with AI right now, and it is a bit of a cat and mouse game. But I also want to point out that while I think big tech needs to certainly step it up here, and we need their help to help us through this kind of transition of what these technologies will do for learning. I also don't believe that it's the firm action we can take that's going to fix everything. There's still going to be lots of tech available, and this stuff is really integrated everywhere, for better or for worse.
Man, that is fascinating. I guess I don't know. I've been using and am using ChatGPT now to a custom GPT to do post production to
Yep.
really to upload the transcript. I could show that. How I guess it's just that this browser OS is going to do the agentic things that have been promised in other. I mean, it says OS, but it's just a browser, right? It's
Yeah.
a browser that has the AI built in, but it's another offering besides those from the other players.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And and I would also note too that and this is a rabbit hole, so I'm not going to go down too far into it, but it does have MCP servers built right into it, which means that you can literally log into your Google Drive and your Gmail and your Google Sheets and Notion and Google Calendar, and it can read and write those things, right? So you can literally say, open up Google browser, put the results in a Google Doc, or so I've talked about a little bit in the past that what I think is really interesting about that is that you can have it in the background doing things like helping track projects or helping keep track of who's doing what inside of a project, in much in the same way a project manager were if you were in a big enough organization to be able to afford such services.
I'm going to show real quick. Is it okay if I show the little post production custom GPT I'm
Oh yeah,
using?
please.
Because I think that'll. I mean, I'm interested in how how these are going to be different. Because like even with Notebook LM and these other tools or anything else that you're buying, it's interesting because when you have access to a full LLM, like it seems like if you can make the prompts, I don't know, it's like why buy this service or whatever. So I'll drop these two links in if you want to check these out. The first one is to the custom GPT, and then this is to a chat transcript. So I actually recreated this for 5. You can go in now to custom GPTs and say, like it by default says use whatever, but you can actually specify the model. And so this is what the custom GPT, anybody can access the GPT, but you can't like edit it if you don't own it. So this is the configuration for it. And so this is the prompt. It's kind of a long prompt. But it basically says, hey, you're going to assist. Oh, and I of course had ChatGPT refine this prompt for me. So this has been iterated for quite a few times. So the context, you're assisting with post production. You're going to receive a YouTube link to the episode. I actually do the transcript and a rich text file containing the show notes. And I've uploaded reference files for past summaries that I've written myself without AI, and then the formatting. And so the objective is to basically do the post-production to give us, if you go to edtechsr.com and now you go to Substack, here's our last episode. So there's the video. We've got this fairly detailed description of everything we talked about. There's a paragraph here, and then we have links we discussed and links we did not discuss. And so I'd like that to be as automated as possible to just make that a real, speedy but accurate process. And so it talks about the style, the tone, the audience, the response format, and what I'm going to want with hashtags, this whole thing. This is a fairly extensive prompt. And then here's the step-by-step workflow of what it's going to do and ask for. So the conversation starter is, upload a YouTube transcript, a URL, and the podcast show notes as a rich text file. And then there's an example of one that we've done before. Use ChatGPT 5. I don't really need a code. It says web search and image generation. But anyway, that is the prompt. And so the actual transcript, it doesn't show you the files when you're looking at it as a visitor or whatever. But I uploaded those files and then the link, and it thinks about it, and it tells me the main themes, just basically so I have a summary of what this episode was about. And again, this is from the transcript. So I don't know what you're using, Jason, for transcripts. This is my favorite free transcription tool right now. I've got my mouse errors here. So it's youtube-transcript.io. So I can take any YouTube video, put it in here, and it takes a little bit to process. So like this show, tomorrow will be fully transcribed, but it won't be transcribed immediately when we stop the show. It does take a little while for it to transcribe. But anyway, it gives me the main themes and suggested hashtags and says, can I go ahead and do the titles? So I have it brainstorm 5 different titles. I want those to all be 3 to 4 words just because I want them to be short. And so I either choose one of those, and sometimes I say, well, let's do something with Google AI and antitrust. Give me 5 options for that. And so it gives me those. And I said, let's focus more on Google Shifts and Gemini. And so then I settle on something. Okay, great. Then it gives me the description, and it says, are you ready for show notes? And I copy those. And I've actually, I haven't had luck, even with this latest iteration, in getting the show notes to be great. And so I am actually, what I'll do is I'll go into our document here. We bold them as we talk about them, and I just organize them, the ones we talked about, and then the ones we don't. So anyway, that's the post-production workflow. And I guess, Jason, the hope would be that an agentic AI system is going to make this even better than what I'm doing now. And then we'll get to run by itself, because now it's a thing where I've got to be there, and even sometimes it'll stall. I mean, this doesn't happen that often with this, but I'll have to prompt it. It'll say, oh, okay, I'll get on that. And then it doesn't seem to do stuff. And I'm like, what's the update? And so the hope of Agentic is like, it'll just keep going until it gets it done. And I'm not going to have to sit there and watch it or nudge it. Is that right?
It is, but at the same time, and I like how my wrist has seemed to have disappeared from my body, but the green screen is a little weird tonight, but but at the same time, there's also risk in that too, right? Because if you give an ambiguous goal to one of these agents and there's no safety or security built into it, in other words, it doesn't know when to say when, then you could see it like, really aggressively pursuing a goal.
And if it's got your credit card number or whatever, or it has access to your email, I mean, there's all kinds of
shenanigans.
What could go wrong? What could
possibly go wrong with that scenario? And that's what I appreciated about Perplexity's security framework, was that they kind of went out of their way to identify when something, whether it might seem innocent, could really create problems. And so they were talking about, sending a message or sending an email. But, I've done some risky things on my computers in the past with large language models, and I've given them access to my file system in order to, test out, what happens when I have it go in and modify docs on my behalf. I've since adopted better strategies, including, narrowing it down to, one folder on my computer that I want to be able to have access to, so it can't dig and dig and dig and dig. But remember, this was 6-8 months ago. Anthropic had released the reports of some of their safety and security testing, and they actually gave it access to an engineer's fake email, of which they put in a bunch of fake naughty things that the engineer was doing. And when they threatened to shut down the model, it threatened to blackmail the engineer, right? And that's not quite as Arnold Schwarzenegger movie as it sounds, because there's a huge ramp up to that. It's not like you turn this thing on and suddenly the robots take over.
But the longer people interact with it, that's when the weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
And that's just like Kevin Roos. If you don't know this, it's like a cultural literacy thing for AI. Early on, when he was interacting with Copilot from Microsoft, he got it to admit its name was Sydney, and it tried to talk him into divorcing his wife so that he could get married to the AI or other bizarre things. But it was a multi-hour conversation. And that's when Microsoft said, well, we're only going to let you talk to Sydney or Copilot, for a short amount of time. And I've read that other places too, that if when things get weird, close the window or whatever. But you can also get it to do things it's not supposed to do sometimes by having these long conversations.
Yeah. And I think we talk about this 2 or 3 times a week, but I just don't think we can stress this enough. You can't treat this like computing as usual, right? And LLMs are not built; they're grown. They have a lot of human characteristics to them. I don't want to suggest that they are human, because they are not, but they act very strangely and oftentimes mimic human emotions in order to please us.
They passed the Turing test, folks. The Turing test is, can you tell if the entity on the other side of the wall that's opaque, is human or not? And they pass that, right? I mean, that's what they've repeatedly done. Am I accurate in that perception?
Well, yeah, and they have, and I want to say particularly ChatGPT has passed that. But the other thing that's also challenging about all this too is that where a lot of folks are so busy arguing about what is artificial general intelligence, or AGI as it's sometimes called. I do know a lot of people in the tech commentary space that would say that debate itself has obscured trying to figure out what progress should really look like in this space. But yeah, it's just a very, very strange set of texts, and that's one of the reasons why that one of our advocacies for on this show, and certainly in the professional work that Dr. Fryer and I do, is that teachers need to spend time playing with these tools just to start wrapping your brain about how strange and weird that they are. I always bristle when I see someone heavily critical of AI. It's not the criticism that I have a problem with. It's that I typed this one thing once into it 18 months ago. It didn't give me the result. Ipso facto, it doesn't work. And that's not the way these tools really work. In the same way that those that use Google searches, with good search technique, receive better results. Prompting still very much matters in this space. I think that's going to become less and less as the AI gets more access to our stuff. I keep expecting Google to jump in the lead of this race, in part because they already have access to all of our information when you are an active Google user. So it's able to build a context around you that is, really quite detail oriented, knowing you perhaps even more than you know yourself. That is concerning. For absolutely sure, but it also should make some of the Google tools at some point more effective in helping you do whatever it is you're asking an AI to help you do with.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But it all changes so fast. Hey man, that's why it's good to have the show though. And I'm glad we've been doing more live demos too, because awareness is important, and it's also nice to sometimes see it. So
yeah.
All right. Well, you want me to take an article, or you want to?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's go.
All right. Oh. In 30 seconds or less, Jason, can you explain quantum computing to me? All right. Quantum computing. This is an article from Canada, from the Walrus, it's from the upcoming December issue. It says it's from October 29th, which is tomorrow. I guess it was published yesterday. Whatever. Today. Quantum computing is coming for your digital secrets. when Q Day arrives, and I've not heard of Q Day before, anything encrypted, emails, banking information, classified materials will be up for grabs. So, what is a quantum computer? A quantum computer is based off of quantum physics, which what Richard Feynman says. If anybody says they can explain to you, they're not telling the truth. We talked about this, I think, on the show a while back, and I cannot tell you right now. This is a long article. I can't explain quantum computing to you, but here's what I can say. There are some really, really smart people, okay, definitely smarter than me, that believe now quantum computers are going to be invented. When they are going to break the encryption, which is commonly used for all e-commerce, actually for all web pages, right? Jason and I are been around long enough to remember the days before HTTPS, right? When there was, what was it called? Black Sheep or something. There was this Black Hat conference, and this guy made this Firefox extension, and you could run it and go to a coffee shop, and then you could be logged in as anybody's Facebook or WordPress blog or whatever, because everyone wasn't running secure socket layer HTTPS encryption. Okay, this is fascinating because what this article says is that on the dark web now, there are these large caches of encrypted data. And basically anything that is encrypted today, when once quantum computers, which may be within the next 10 years, maybe it's going to be 50 years, no one knows. But once these things are available, they will be able to take any encrypted data and they're going to be able to open it up, see it, and do whatever they want. And that is, and the point of this is, the world is not ready for this. Now, in addition to introducing me to Q Day, which is the idea of quantum computing is now available, it also says that there are some solutions, and there's something called the BB84 protocol, and it's a way of transferring encrypted data using quantum physics, and it has to do with this. I don't know. I had a really great high school physics teacher, and then physics in college wasn't great for me, but I think physics is cool. And in quantum entanglement and this idea of things being at a distance and interacting, I mean, it's wild stuff. And if you have anyone in your life that is knowledgeable about this stuff, it is interesting to talk about, but on a very practical basis, we just got to be careful how much confidence we're taking in encrypted systems, because according to this article, all that stuff is going to be, out in the public, and it's going to, we're really just not ready for it. And I don't know, I'm trying not to share this like this guy is going to fall. It's just, there's some stuff I had not heard of before, and kind of like the whole, are we at the singularity? Is the singularity going to be real? Are AI is going to become smarter than people? And I think they already are in some ways. The fact that there's so many smart mathematicians and others, physicists and others that say that this is going to happen, it's pretty wild. So do you have any thoughts, Dr. Neifer, on what may appear to be quite esoteric and, theoretical at this point, but it's still kind of wild?
Right. Well, and Google is making a ton of progress here, right? I think we've reported on that a couple of times over, that the computers that have thousands of more times power than the supercomputers, even of 2025, are, they're big, wild sized pieces, not unlike the early computers, the 1950s and 60s. But the bottom line is that they're headed in that direction. And the reason why I always find these discussions quite amusing is because this is something that is forecasted in the HBO sitcom Silicon Valley, which is still by far one of my favorite shows of all time. It has an R rate. Well, it doesn't have an R rate. It's a TV show, but it has an adult rating for good reason, because there's a lot of salty language in that show. But it thinks about what happens when AI is able to crack encryption keys and what that could possibly mean to the world. And that's the last season of the show, is that the technology that they create, which, by the way, is scaled up AI, not unlike the technologies we're talking about today. Is able to crack encryption and starts driving people's Teslas around and stuff. It's pretty funny stuff and weirdly accurate. But yeah, it is hugely scary, and there is an extraordinary amount of data right now that we presume is safe in relatively insecure caches, just because it's encrypted, right? Because that is the gold standard. And by the way, I remember where I was when that
Firesheep.
yeah, when Firesheep came out, I was sitting in a coffee shop in suburban Washington, D.C., and my wife was at a conference, and I went with her because we ended up spending a couple of days in DC, and I was in a coffee shop and downloaded this to Firefox and was able to see 7 or 8 different Facebook sessions across the coffee shop, and it both delighted me from the nerdiness standpoint, and it also terrified me. And gave me a really upfront view of why encrypted sessions are so important on the web. But yeah, interesting stuff for sure.
There's my blog post, November 1st, 2010. Firesheep should get your attention. Open public Wi-Fi dangers are real.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Can I talk about Grokpedia?
Please do.
Okay. Well, we try not to be a culture war show here, but every once in a while there is information that relates to culture war issues. So everyone's favorite big tech owner, Elon, has launched a Wikipedia rival called Grokpedia, and it is a right-leaning Wikipedia that is going to portray him in very positive light, and also things like the January 6th attack on the Capitol and other things. So it really is wonderful to me that Wikipedia is over 20 years old, and it is a very fascinating community to study. In fact, I was asking my web design kids who are 7th and 8th graders about what a blog and a wiki, what those are, and they don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to dive into this to learn a little bit about how these work. But you can look in an article, how has it been edited, who has edited it, what does the talk page say? There's all, John Green has a fantastic crash course video that I still use for a sketch note. We'll do it here in a couple of weeks with my class about Wikipedia and how it all works. And so anyway, I think that the fact that all of us can go to Wikipedia today and we get to see the same page, right? Because if we go to YouTube right now, you and I are going to see a different page. If we're logged in, it's going to be based upon our history and tracking cookies and all of this kind of stuff. And so, I don't know. I think I probably will mention this to my students. I've been so nervous about saying anything related to politics and polarization, and I'm not wanting to get myself in any trouble. But the idea of an encyclopedia is really important. But bias exists, right? And who's writing the textbook? I mean, who writes whatever the article is? It's important to know the source. This is a part of media literacy. So the interesting thing is Grok is the main driver apparently for this Grokpedia, hence the name. And there's a whole lot of very troubling and problematic hallucinations that this Grokpedia has made. And it's also evidently scraped a ton of content directly from Wikipedia, and then it's edited it and changed it. So I think that this is something that could be good to talk with students about, and vetting information and trying to figure out, well, what did happen in this episode of history, and what are these varying perspectives that someone has. I think it's valuable. So, Dr. Knife, are you going to be abandoning Wikipedia soon and embracing Grokpedia as your primary source of knowledge?
I don't see that happening, in part because, and it's not even about the kind of political bend behind it. I like the Wikipedia because you can see the editing process, right? And I don't I'm also trying to be careful too. I exist in a public sphere that involves politics, but in the same way that I wouldn't tell kids to quote the Wikipedia, not because it's not accurate, but because the value of that tool is digging into the links. I would encourage students to do the same thing with the Rockopedia. I'm just looking right now. I did pick a couple of kind of politically loaded search terms, and as expected, because it's kind of advertised as having that right bend to it. So that's exactly what it delivered. But click on the sources, find out more about it. I do think that it's a bit troublesome to not have that as or not have an editing history, and apparently there is some agency on the part of the Grok model to go in and edit based on political factors. In other words, like the day-to-day politics or day-to-day news. I think that seems problematic and maybe even touch dystopian. But the bottom line is that it's another voice in the marketplace. We need to make sure students know what's behind it, not because it's inaccurate, but because that there are going to be lots of competing facts, lots of competing ideas in the grand marketplace of ideas. And it just adds more smoke, I think, to our very, very fragmented and very challenging fact and media landscape.
It's a good opportunity for media literacy conversations, and that may be more appropriate to a high school, college, or graduate environment. But taking a topic, seeing what different sources are saying about that, and analyzing the sources, and all that's sort of a bedrock media literacy type activity. So that was a headline that definitely caught my eye, and it's being powered by AI. So I probably should have put it under our AI category instead of miscellaneous, but. All right. What would you like to do next, sir?
Yeah, let's talk about maybe just a couple of quick hit updates also on the AI front. First, Adobe and Google are teaming up for further working together on AI stuff. The Adobe, I think it's called the Max Conference, or Adobe Max 2025. I was right. Is this week, and so there are a lot of new announcements, and you're starting to notice that some of the big tech players, especially the core tech products like Google, Microsoft, et cetera, are starting to pair up with some of the more niche products. Adobe obviously is in that creative space, but Adobe and Google will be deepening their relationship in a move that they hope will allow Google, or at least from Google's vantage point, allow them to stake a claim as the kind of frontier of frontier models. But many of the Google media generation tools like Gemini, Veo, and Imagine are now going to be directly available in Adobe Firefly, Photoshop, Premiere, Generation Studio, Adobe Express, all of the tool sets that Adobe offers. The reason why this is interesting to me, and I don't think any of the articles that I read on this spoke to it, but one of the things that did seem very interesting about Adobe's plays were that they would tell you that they only trained image generation models based on content or IP, intellectual property that they owned. And that was a big play, because if you are a professional in this space and you're using generative AI in order to make media that's then going to be used for some commercial purpose, then that gave you some indemnification. I think I may have added an extra syllable there. Against lawsuits, right? Because there is, shocking numbers of copyright and IP lawsuits right now related to LLM. So I thought that was a really interesting play that they are using Google tools there. And then there are some more direct tools around publishing to Google properties, in particular YouTube. So now there's going to be in the Premiere Mobile app a create for YouTube Shorts, which essentially is an AI enhanced workflow that allows you to easily create an AI short.
Or we could say an AI slot machine. Slot.
Yeah.
S-L-O-P. And I think we've talked about that before.
We have.
It's interesting who is in our lives and who is reporting on social media. One of our children, who is in her early 20s, talked about one of her social media feeds just being chock full of AI generated reels, which sometimes are called AI slop. And I think that this is something that it's not just to brace for. I think it's something we have to deal with. Training our feeds, and I've been working on this in Facebook, right? And like hiding things that I don't want to see, and a lot of that I mean, AI stuff can be wild and it can be interesting, and of course it's engineered for attention, but it doesn't mean I want my feed filled with it. And thankfully we're not helpless. We do have some tools like Facebook provides to be able to say, hide this, and show me more golden retrievers or whatever, cooking videos or whatever. But this is the trend line that we're seeing for video and social media. And that is the merge, and we've talked about this before, of these AI tools from their separate web pages and separate places right into the productivity world, the creation tools. And so I think this move with Adobe, I didn't watch the video, but as a YouTube creator myself, on the homepage of the dashboard of YouTube Studio, they had an update just real recently about all these updates for shorts to try to really help creators. And I haven't dove deeply into them, but even tonight in studio, it's pretty interesting, all the different ideas and the ways that YouTube is wanting to help you as a creator brainstorm and create content that's more likely to be engaging. And it's just, of course, wild to have now the world of AI, not just with images, but also with video. And so, I mean, I'm sure this can also just feel overwhelming, but this is the world. Isn't there like a Robert R. Murrow or something like that? And the world today. So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, totally.
AI
And
today.
and you mentioned slop earlier, and I'm also it's something I've been really thinking about too in context of education, that there is education slop. And I don't think it's any particular app or any particular strategy, but if you're generating things in even an education facing tool and you're not qualified to judge either whether it's educationally relevant or content relevant, I mean, you do run the risk of subjecting your students to you created slop, and it is a very real thing. Now that said, there are plenty of ways to mitigate that I think are perfectly reasonable. I think that other folks may disagree, that are a little more in the anti-AI set, and I think reasonable people can disagree about these things. But yeah, at some point in the relatively near future, I'm sure that's where a lot a lot of the discussion is going to start to go to, especially when it comes to education facing apps.
So one more article from the show notes. This is from October 23rd, TechCrunch. Instagram users can now use Meta AI editing tools directly in Instagram stories. So again, this idea, you're creating the companies, whether it's YouTube, Adobe, Meta, Facebook, they're putting these tools in the hands of creators so that folks can edit their videos and put other kinds of AI things in there. Peggy's asking in the chat, do I teach students to recognize the slop? I haven't done a whole unit on deepfakes before. I've talked about them. Right now I don't know. I mean, it's becoming more mainstream. I teach middle school, and so it's really varied in terms of some kids don't have phones yet, especially a sixth grader or seventh grader, but a lot of them do. And by eighth grade, I mean, we got a lot of first graders that have phones. It's a real wide gamut of tech use. So we need to do more with that. And I probably need to do that this year.
And I would also say too that one of the challenges of kind of an AI slop dominated world is that it's AI generated to get engagement,
Oh,
right? And I've not that I never open TikTok anymore. I just have it on only one of one device, and as Dr. Fryer knows, saying I only have something on one device really does mean something because the sheer number of devices that I regularly use. But I've noticed that there is AI generated videos aimed at Grizz football fans. So University of Montana football. I believe that the team is 8-0 at this point, top ranked team in the league, and lots of fan excitement around that. But there is an AI generated mascot looking something or another that's getting tons of both views and likes, and and the commentary is nothing more than go Grizz. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that per se, but I did see a demo last year of a startup that was pushing some actually pretty I thought it was kind of gross content, AI generated video content. On this particular case, they were showing what farming was like. I believe it was in Somalia, and I found that quite dystopian, because I don't really want, especially since we know about all the biases that are built into AI, I don't really want content video being one shot prompt generated for students, because I think that seems, especially if we're talking about, I'm particularly sensitive to social studies because that's what I taught, but I think that's something we want to be extra super duper concerned about. And slop is real.
It is, and media literacy is important. So I don't know how we did it, Dr. Knifer, but it has been an hour, and it's been wonderful to have some live folks in our chat room. Do you have any geeks of the week that you would like to share with us? Or you can go for an article, because sometimes we go to 5 or 10 minutes over. So if there's
Sure.
another burning article you got, share that too.
I have two great geeks of the week that might actually take me a moment or two to explain. The first one is an open source piece of software called Gemini Desk. And for those of you that are Gemini only, and that is a quite reasonable stance to be in, especially if you received a free account for a year with a Chromebook, or you have a school-based account. Gemini Desk is a desktop app for Windows, Mac, and Linux that allow you to add in some features kind of like the ChatGPT desktop app or Claude desktop app, but instead for Gemini. And it's very actively developed. I really like it. It's something that I used on my laptop as I was traveling over the last week, and as I travel next week as well, I'll be using that. Gemini is a really wonderful a frontier model that I think is very competitive with the other major frontier models. And if you like that desktop app, I think that that's a really great way to do that. And so again, it's open source software, so it's free, and it's just a nice, clean app that kind of gives you the desktop AI experience, but specific to Gemini. And then last,
Can I ask about that? That's a GitHub. So do you have to compile it and do like some geeky stuff to get it to work?
you don't. They have compiled desktop apps for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, and so you do have to add in a little security thing in order to get to work on Mac, because of how locked down Mac OS is, which is a good thing in this particular scenario. But also, if you're in a district that is using Gemini and you don't like to use it as an app, this is something I would discuss with your tech people. It's open source, so there's a bit of transparency there. And if your district is using Gemini and you want a desktop app instead of the web experience, I think this is something that you could have a nice conversation with the people in your tech department to see if they'll allow you to install this on a school machine. And then last week, I also talked about the open source downloadable program called Olama, which allows you, particularly on newer Macs, to run local large language models. And it's really great. I spent several hours in the last couple of weeks on airplanes, and sometimes I pay for the Wi-Fi, and oftentimes I do not. And so I have a pretty beefy MacBook Pro that I run Olama on, and I can literally run ChatGPT. But I discovered something really interesting, which is there's a plugin you can get for Thunderbird. Thunderbird is is the Mozilla Foundation. They're the maker of Firefox. It's their mail client, and you can download Thunderbird. You can add this Thunder AI plugin and then point it towards a llama. So essentially run it on your desktop. It's completely private because it's being run locally on your machine. And it does some pretty nifty things, including reviewing emails for tone and for grammar and spelling. It will auto tag emails. So in other words, you can ask it to tag the emails that are most important for you to answer first. And so we'll analyze your email. And again, it all happens locally on your machine. Again, it works better with a really beefy PC or a recent Apple Silicon Mac, but it's a way that you can run a private model locally and then have it do something very practical. You can also use it with an OpenAI key or a Gemini key or an Open Router key.
Wow. All right. Well, I just have one, and I think I might have mentioned it before, but it's Pinboard. And this is a throwback to Delicious and Digo, which people are still using Digo. But Alan Levine, Cogdog, who, if you don't follow Cogdog, immediately drop everything you're doing, Google Cogdog, and get to follow Alan Levine, because Alan is a guru of all tech, especially digital storytelling and just, awesome stuff. But he is using Pinboard, and I wanted a way, I think this summer, to be able to automate like sharing things. Anyway, this is my tag cloud. So these are all the tags that I've used. And like there's a tag I use called podcast recommendation. So when I find a website that I like, that I think I might want my kids to look at, this was a tribute to the Far Side. That wasn't the actual website. Anyway, there's a lot. Oh, that's podcast recommendation. Yeah. When I do a podcast recommendation, they automatically send out to my Mastodon account. But not podcast rec. There is a one for just website recommendation. And so anyway, it's sort of interesting when somebody's, sharing bookmarks like this, because, it's eclectic. There's all kinds of stuff that I'm sharing, but here it is, website examples. So for instance, category 5 hurricane just hit Jamaica, and I found this website, Support Jamaica. It's from the government. And of course, whenever natural disasters occur, you got to watch out for scams, and there's all sorts of bad actors that are going to try to exploit them. But this came from a reliable news source, and it's from the government of Jamaica, and it's about hurricane relief. But my kids are oftentimes, these are all shelters that you can go to on the island. And so there's interesting, geomap, and this is real-time stuff that people are using. But the tool is called Pinboard. It is not free. You have to pay for it, but it's very reasonable, and it's kind of cool. And so I've got a little website. So like if I wanted to save Gemini Desk, I would say pin this. I can highlight text, and I click pin this, and I can put whatever tags I want, and they'll pop up, and I could put, more than AI, but anyway, then save the bookmark, and it's gonna be there. So that is Pinboard. Oh, Dr. Neifer, when you are not giving us more to explore and play with, and causing us to realize just how far behind the rest of us are with the world of AI, where can people find you?
Easily. Best place to find me is LinkedIn. It's where it's really the only social network I'm very active on, but you can also find more information about me at aicentrist.com. And you, Dr. Fryer?
I am at wesfryer.com, and you can find lots of visual links to projects I'm involved in, and click my connect page to get a lot of other links. But this is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a weekly podcast that is now updated across all of your favorite podcast channels. You can simply go to edtechsr.com, and you can click links to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, YouTube, your favorite one. And Substack is actually where we are posting all of our links, so you can access all of the links from today's show, including the links that we did not have time to discuss. And you can can find that at edtechsr.substack.com. We thank Peggy, SNC, and my dad, Tom Fryer in Manhattan, Kansas, for tuning in with us tonight. And we encourage you, send us or write us a review. You can also send us a message, but let other people know about us, especially follow us on Facebook, because I think we're up to like 59 followers or something. And once we get up to 100, we could live stream to Facebook. And we all know that is really the secret to virality. And that will just define success for Dr. Knifer and I when we're again live streaming to Facebook. So until we're together next time, we encourage you to stay safe, play with AI, sandbox and air gap your AI agentic browsers. And we'll see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room.
Good night.